Commander Sarah Chen stood at attention in the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Concordat, trying not to fidget as representatives from 1,000 worlds debated humanity's worth. The massive chamber, carved from a single asteroid and lined with quantum crystal displays, made her feel smaller than she'd ever felt before. The humans request participation in the Combined Defense Initiative. The question came from Ambassador Xerath, their crystalline form shifting through patterns of deep violet and azure. They achieved FTL travel mere decades ago. Sarah maintained her composure, though her hand instinctively tightened on the datapad containing Earth's petition. After 15 years of diplomatic negotiations, humanity had finally secured a provisional membership in the Concordat. Now came the real test, proving they deserved a place in the galaxy's unified defense force. "We're prepared to contribute our full technological and strategic capabilities," Sarah responded, her voice steady despite the subtle vibrations of disapproval rippling through the chamber. High Admiral Kin, a being of pure energy contained within an ornate environmental suit, moved forward. As per tradition, new members received their first ship assignment today. However, the Admiral's form flickered with what Sarah interpreted as amusement. Options are limited. The massive holographic display at the chamber's center materialized into a sprawling shipyard inventory. Sarah watched as vessel after vessel was assigned to other species. The Meridians received their requested dreadnought. The Zix Collective claimed 3 stealth cruisers. Even the newly admitted Vorathi secured a modern corvette squadron. Finally, only one vessel remained, the HSS 471. The ship's hologram rotated slowly, revealing a patchwork hull and mismatched systems that spoke of countless repairs and modifications. A decommissioned hegemony warship, Admiral Kin announced, recovered from the Battle of the Scared Nebula. Multiple attempts at restoration have failed. The ship's systems are incompatible with modern standards. Sarah studied the vessel carefully. Where others saw obsolescence, she noticed something else: possibility. The irregular hull patterns suggested adaptive armor. The asymmetrical engine configuration hinted at unconventional maneuverability. Most importantly, she recognized the ship's designation prefix. The HS prefix, Sarah said, drawing surprised murmurs from the assembly. This was a hegemony special systems vessel. Admiral Kin's energy form pulsed with surprise. You recognize the classification. Earth's synorchaeologists have studied the hegemony extensively. Their Special Systems Division was legendary for experimental technologies. Sarah stepped forward, her voice gaining confidence. We accept the assignment. The chamber erupted in a mixture of laughter and dismissive gestures. The Meridian representative's crystalline form actually fractured slightly from amusement. You accept this? Ambassador Xerath's tone dripped with condescension. The vessel has defeated our best restoration attempts for centuries. Sarah smiled. Perhaps that's because you've been trying to restore it to what it was, rather than imagine what it could become. As the assignment was formally processed, Sarah transmitted a quick message to her engineering team waiting in Earth's orbital shipyards. The response came almost immediately. Challenge accepted. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in the HSS 471's cavernous main hangar, watching as her hand-picked crew swarmed over the vessel like ants rebuilding a colony. Chief Engineer Maya Patil approached, her augmented reality display projecting a cascade of diagnostic data. It's better than we thought, Maya said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. The Concordat engineers tried to force modern systems into an incompatible framework. But if we work with the ship's original architecture instead of against it. Sarah nodded. How long until we can begin trials? 3 months, minimum. We'll need to completely rewire the neural pathways, rebuild the quantum core, and... Maya paused, noticing Sarah's expression. What? We have 6 weeks until the Concordat's annual fleet exercises. Sarah's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Maya's augmented display flickered as she ran new calculations. 6 weeks to make a centuries-old experimental warship combat-ready. That's impossible. Sarah grinned. Impossible is humanity's specialty. The HSS-471's bones creaked as it absorbed its first power surge in centuries, and Sarah swore she felt something awaken in the ancient vessel. The Concordat had given them their worst ship, expecting failure. They were about to learn why that was a mistake. The ancient ship's maintenance bay thrummed with activity as Chief Engineer Maya Patil crawled through a service tunnel, her augmented reality display highlighting the vessel's neural conduits in ghostly blue light. Behind her, Dr. James Wilson, their quantum systems specialist, muttered calculations under his breath. "Look at this architecture," Maya called back, her hand tracing a complex pattern of crystalline pathways. The hegemony wasn't building traditional computer systems. These neural networks, they're organic, which explains why the Concordat's attempts to upgrade it failed. James replied, his own display analyzing power fluctuations. They tried to impose rigid quantum algorithms on a system designed to evolve. Throughout the massive vessel, similar discoveries were being made. The HSS-471 systems defied conventional classification. Its power core didn't just generate energy. It learned from its own output patterns. The weapon systems weren't simply programmed. They adapted based on combat experience. Commander Chen entered the engineering hub, where holographic displays showed the ship's transformation in real time. "Talk to me, Maya. How are we progressing?" Maya emerged from the service tunnel, her face streaked with conductive gel. "We've cracked the hegemony's basic architecture. They weren't building a warship, Sarah. They were growing one." Growing? The neural pathways, the adaptive systems, even the whole composition. Everything's designed to learn and evolve. But here's the fascinating part. The ship's original AI wasn't controlling these systems. It was communicating with them. James pulled up a complex diagnostic overlay. Traditional ship AIs operate through command and control. This one, it's more like a conversation, a partnership. Sarah studied the displays, her military training wrestling with the implications. Can we rebuild it? Better. Maya's eyes gleamed. We can teach it. The Concordat engineers failed because they tried to impose their own rigid protocols. We're going to let the ship show us what it can do. Over the next 4 weeks, the human crew worked in shifts that blurred the line between days and nights. They didn't simply repair systems. They collaborated with them. The ship's neural networks were gradually reactivated, each one carefully monitored as it began to relearn its purpose. The breakthrough came during a routine power distribution test. Maya was attempting to balance energy flow between the weapons and propulsion systems when she noticed something unexpected. The ship wasn't just accepting the power regulations, it was improving them. "It's not just following the protocols," she explained to Commander Chen during an emergency briefing. "It's optimizing them in ways we never considered. Look at this power curve." The holographic display showed energy flowing through the ship's systems like blood through veins. But instead of the rigid patterns typical of military vessels, this flow was dynamic, organic, almost beautiful in its complexity. "The ship isn't just processing our commands," James added. "It's interpreting them, finding connections we missed." Yesterday, it suggested a completely novel approach to quantum shield modulation, not through direct communication, but by demonstrating the pattern in its own systems. Sarah watched the energy patterns dance across the display. "Are you saying this ship is helping us repair it?" "More than that." Maya pulled up another diagram. "We've been so focused on fixing what we thought was broken, we almost missed what the ship was trying to show us. These aren't just systems that need repair, they're templates for innovation." The team began incorporating elements of Earth's newest technologies, not by forcing them into the existing framework, but by allowing them to interact naturally with the ship's adaptive architecture. Quantum processors were paired with neural networks. Traditional weapon systems were enhanced by organic targeting algorithms. Each addition wasn't just installed, it was introduced, like adding a new instrument to an orchestra. 2 weeks before the fleet exercises, Sarah stood on the bridge of the HSS 471, watching as systems came online one by one. The ship no longer felt like a derelict being forced back to life. It felt alive, aware, waiting. Final diagnostics are complete, Maya reported, her voice tight with exhaustion and excitement. All systems are responding. But Sarah, they're not just responding. They're anticipating. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying not just sensor data but interpretations of that data. The ship wasn't simply showing them what it saw, it was showing them what it understood. We're not going to win the fleet exercise by having the most advanced technology, Sarah realized, watching the displays shift and flow. We're going to win it by having the most adaptive. The HSS 471's systems pulsed with power, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn she felt a sense of agreement emanating from the ship itself. The Concordat had given them a vessel they thought was beyond saving. Instead, they had given humanity exactly what it needed: a chance to prove that the best innovations don't come from superior technology, but from the willingness to see possibilities where others see only limitations. The Concordat's testing grounds spanned an entire star system, its space dotted with sensor arrays and quantum beacon networks that could simulate any combat scenario imaginable. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the HSS 471, watching as the massive holographic countdown timer ticked away the final minutes before the fleet exercises began. Final system check complete, Maya reported from her engineering station, her augmented display showing cascading streams of diagnostic data. Though complete might not be the right word anymore. The ship keeps tweaking its own configurations. The vessel had been doing that more frequently lately, making minute adjustments to power distribution, shield harmonics, and weapon alignments. Not random changes, but deliberate optimizations based on its growing understanding of its capabilities. Look at them out there, Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez commented from Tactical, gesturing at the assembled Concordat vessels. Betting pools are already running on how quickly we'll fail. The other ships were indeed a sight to behold. The Meridian Dreadnought gleamed like a star made solid, its crystalline hull refracting sensor beams in impossible patterns. The Zix stealth cruisers were barely visible, their quantum camouflage bending light around them. Each vessel represented the pinnacle of its civilization's military technology. The HSS 471, by contrast, still looked like what they'd been given: a patchwork vessel of mismatched parts and aged systems. They deliberately maintained that appearance, seeing no reason to advertise their modifications. Exercise parameters incoming, James announced from the science station. First scenario is interesting. The simulation parameters materialized on the main view screen. A complex orbital defense scenario, requiring ships to penetrate a multi-layered defensive grid while protecting a civilian convoy. It was the kind of test that demanded both tactical precision and strategic adaptability. They're not starting us easy, Sarah noted, settling into her command chair. Good. The countdown reached 0, and the star system transformed. Quantum projectors created the illusion of planetary bodies, defense platforms, and enemy vessels. The simulation was so precise that sensors couldn't distinguish it from reality. The Meridian Dreadnought moved first, its crystalline hull flaring, as it launched a conventional assault on the outer defense perimeter. The Zix cruisers vanished completely, attempting to slip through gaps in the sensor coverage. Each ship followed established tactical doctrines, applying centuries of military theory to the challenge. Your orders, Commander, Carlos asked, his fingers hovering over the tactical controls. Sarah smiled. Let's show them something new. Maya, activate the neural response systems. James, begin entropy analysis. Carlos, prepare for dynamic targeting. The HSS 471 systems hummed to life, but not in the rigid, predetermined way of other military vessels. The ship's neural networks began processing the battlefield in real time, not just analyzing sensor data, but understanding patterns, predicting movements, seeing connections that conventional tactical systems might miss. They're expecting us to either charge in blindly or try to copy their advanced maneuvers, Sarah explained. So let's do neither. Maya, initiate adaptive resonance. The ship's power core pulsed, sending energy flowing through its neural pathways in a unique configuration. Instead of trying to penetrate or evade the defense grid, they began to harmonize with it. The HSS-471 systems synchronized with the quantum frequencies of the defensive platforms, not to attack them, but to become part of their network. Are we talking to their defenses? Carlos asked incredulously. In a manner of speaking. James's displays showed complex wave patterns. The ship isn't trying to beat their systems. It's learning to speak their language. The result was unprecedented. While other vessels engaged in conventional combat, the HSS-471 moved through the battlefield like water flowing through cracks. Defense platforms recognized them as part of their own network. Sensor grids included them in their blind spots. They weren't fighting the simulation. They were becoming part of it. Multiple targeting solutions available, Carlos reported, his tactical display alive with possibilities that no conventional system would have recognized. Don't fire, Sarah ordered. Show them something better. Using its understanding of the defense grid's patterns, the HSS-471 began creating gaps in coverage, gaps that the civilian convoy could exploit. They weren't just completing the mission. They were transforming the entire scenario. In the observation hub, Concordat military officials watched in stunned silence as their supposedly obsolete vessels systematically dismantled the exercise's parameters, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through an entirely new approach to combat. Second scenario incoming, James announced, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. The simulation shifted, presenting new challenges, new threats, new complexities. But with each scenario, the HSS-471 demonstrated not just capability but evolution. The ship learned from each engagement, adapted to each challenge, and showed the Concordat something they hadn't seen in centuries: innovation. By the end of the exercise, the observation hub had fallen completely silent. The betting pools were forgotten. The mockery had ceased, because they had all just witnessed something impossible, a ship that didn't just fight battles, but understood them. As the final simulation ended, Sarah stood from her command chair, her crew beaming with pride. "Send a message to Concordat Command," she ordered. "Tell them we're ready for the next test." The HSS-471 systems pulsed with what felt like anticipation. They had just shown the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in having the most advanced technology, but in finding new ways to use what they had. And they were just getting started. The first warning came from a remote research outpost at the edge of Concordat space. It wasn't the message itself that was unusual. Stations often reported anomalies, but rather how it ended, mid-transmission, replaced by a burst of quantum static that defied analysis. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the Concordat's emergency council chamber, watching as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The HSS-471 had been conducting routine patrol duties when the recall order came. 3 more stations have gone silent, High Admiral Kin announced, their energy form flickering with concern. Long-range sensors show disturbances in the fabric of space-time itself. The massive holographic display showed a spreading darkness at the galaxy's edge. Not the familiar darkness of space, but something that seemed to consume light itself. Sensor data scrolled past in endless streams, each reading more disturbing than the last. The Meridian Deep Space probes detected it first. Ambassador Xareth reported, their crystalline form dulled with worry. Some kind of quantum-level disruption. It's as if reality itself is being unwritten. Sarah studied the data, her mind racing. The ship's neural networks had been detecting subtle anomalies for weeks, fluctuations that conventional sensors dismissed as background noise. Now those patterns were beginning to make sense. Maya. She subvocalized through her neural link to the HSS 471. Are you seeing this? Already processing. Her chief engineer responded. The ship's been analyzing similar patterns since our last patrol. It's been trying to tell us something, but we didn't have enough data to understand what. The council chamber erupted in debate as the Concordette's finest minds grappled with the threat. The Meridian proposed a defensive line of quantum-reinforced battleships. The Zix suggested cloaking entire sectors of space. Each species approached the problem with their most advanced technology. The hegemony, Sarah said suddenly, her voice cutting through the chaos. They encountered something similar. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Kin's energy form pulsed with interest. Explain. Sarah gestured, and the HSS 471's data began flowing into the main display. We found references in the ship's deep archives. The hegemony didn't just build special systems vessels for warfare. They were preparing for something. Something that existed between normal space and void. The historical data merged with current sensor readings, revealing patterns that had been hidden in plain sight. The darkness wasn't just consuming space, it was processing it, breaking down the fundamental forces of reality into raw information. It's not an invasion, Sarah explained, the ship's neural networks helping her understand patterns that normal human perception might miss. It's a conversion. This entity, whatever it is, doesn't destroy systems. It transforms them into something else, something it can understand. The Meridian fleet stands ready. A crystalline admiral declared, "We will meet this threat with overwhelming force." "No," Sarah countered, her voice firm. "You can't fight this with conventional weapons. The more complex your technology, the more vulnerable you are. This entity doesn't just destroy advanced systems. It absorbs them, learns from them." As if to prove her point, long-range sensors detected a Meridian battle group engaging the anomaly. The crystalline ships, prey of the Concordate fleet, lasted less than 30 seconds. They didn't explode or break apart. They simply ceased to exist, their quantum crystal technology providing the entity with new patterns to consume. "How can you be so certain of this analysis?" Ambassador Xerith demanded. "Because our ship has been learning to think the way it thinks," Sarah replied. The HSS 471 wasn't just built to fight. It was built to understand. And right now, it's telling us that conventional warfare isn't just useless, it's counterproductive. The council chamber's displays suddenly shifted, showing new data as the HSS 471 transmitted its findings. The ship's neural networks had been processing centuries of accumulated data, finding patterns that traditional computers would never recognize. "We don't need better weapons," Sarah declared. "We need a new language, a way to communicate with something that doesn't just consume reality. It redefines it." High Admiral Kin studied the data with growing comprehension. "You're proposing to talk to it. This thing that has already consumed 3 star systems." "Not exactly talk," Sarah corrected. "We need to show it something it hasn't encountered before. Adaptation without consumption. Change without destruction. The very things that humanity has always excelled at." The chamber erupted in argument again, but Sarah's attention was drawn to new data flowing from her ship. The HSS 471's neural networks were already developing theoretical models, finding ways to translate human adaptability into something this entity might understand. "We'll need time," Maya reported through their link. "The ship's capabilities are expanding, but we're trying to do something unprecedented." Sarah looked up at the massive display, watching as the darkness continued to spread. Time was the one thing they didn't have. But then again, humanity had always done its best work under impossible deadlines. "Prepare the ship," she ordered. "We're about to attempt first contact with something that doesn't just break the rules, it rewrites them." The HSS 471's systems pulsed with what felt like anticipation. They had been given this ship because no one else could understand it. Now that very incomprehension might be the key to saving the galaxy. The HSS 471, hung at the edge of what had once been the Centauri sector, its systems humming with purpose. Through the bridge viewport, Commander Sarah Chen watched as reality itself seemed to unravel before them, the entity's presence transforming normal space into something that human eyes struggle to comprehend. Final modifications complete, Maya reported from engineering, her voice tight with exhaustion. They'd been working for 72 hours straight, pushing the ship's adaptive capabilities to their absolute limits. Though complete might not be the right word anymore. The ship keeps making its own adjustments. That's exactly what we need, Sarah replied, studying the swirling patterns of distorted space-time ahead. James, status of the translation matrix. The quantum specialist's hands danced across his console, coordinating with the ship's neural networks. We're as ready as we'll ever be. The ship has developed something unprecedented. It's not just a communication system. It's a way of sharing consciousness. Behind them, the last remnants of the Concordat fleet maintained a defensive perimeter. The Meridian dreadnoughts, Zix cruisers, and other advanced vessels waited with weapons charged, a final line of defense if the human experiment failed. Their presence was both reassuring and concerning. Each ship represented more potential data for the entity to consume. What exactly are we attempting here? Lieutenant Rodriguez asked from Tactical, his displays showing weapon systems that had been transformed into something entirely new. We're going to show it something it's never seen before, Sarah explained. Not resistance, not submission, but evolution. Maya, initiate the sequence. The HSS-471's neural networks activated in a unique configuration. Instead of projecting shields or charging weapons, the ship began generating patterns of quantum energy that mimicked the entity's own transformative processes. But where the entity consumed and converted, they offered something different: collaboration. Broadcasting now, James announced. The ship is, there's no real word for what it's doing. It's showing the entity its own history, how it learned to work with us instead of being controlled by us. The response was immediate and intense. The swirling chaos ahead seemed to pause, as if something vast and incomprehensible had suddenly noticed a curious anomaly. Streams of corrupted data crashed against the HSS-471 systems, not as an attack, but as an attempt to understand. It's responding. Maya's voice was filled with wonder. The neural networks are. They're having a conversation. Not with words or data, but with possibilities. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, Sarah could almost see it. Two forms of consciousness reaching across the void, each trying to comprehend the other. The entity had encountered countless civilizations, each one either fighting back with increasingly complex technology or succumbing to its transformative power. But it had never met anything that offered a third option. We're showing it that change doesn't require destruction, Sarah realized. That adaptation can be mutual. The ship's neural networks pulsed with increasing complexity, sharing not just data but experience. It showed the entity how humans had taken a discarded vessel and helped it grow into something new. How progress didn't require the elimination of what came before, but could build upon it. Suddenly, the swirling chaos ahead began to shift. Not retreating, but changing. The patterns of destruction became patterns of transformation. Where moments before there had been only consumption, now there was something like curiosity. Multiple quantum signatures detected, Rodriguez reported. Something's happening to the consumed systems. Like watching a film in reverse, they saw matter and energy beginning to reconstruct. Not back to what they had been, but into something new. The entity wasn't just understanding their message, it was applying it, learning to create instead of merely consume. It's beautiful, Maya whispered, watching as new forms of space-time took shape, neither fully normal space nor completely transformed, but something in between. It's learning to coexist. The HSS-471's neural networks hummed with satisfaction, recognizing in the entity's transformation something of its own journey. Both had been forces of change, but while one had learned only to consume, the other had discovered the power of synthesis. Hours later, in the Concordet's council chamber, Sarah stood before the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds. The emergency was over, but its implications were just beginning to be understood. "We didn't defeat the entity," she explained to the gathered dignitaries. "We offered it a new way to grow. The same way humanity approached this ship, not by imposing our will upon it, but by learning to grow together." High Admiral Kin's energy form pulsed with what might have been respect. "You've changed everything, Commander. Not just our understanding of that entity, but of evolution itself." Sarah smiled, thinking of the HSS 471 waiting in orbit above, its systems still humming with the excitement of discovery. "That's what humans do best, Admiral. We don't just adapt to the universe. We help it adapt with us." The ship's neural networks registered agreement, its consciousness now forever changed by its encounter with the entity. They had been given the Concordet's worst vessel, expected to fail. Instead, they had shown the galaxy that the most powerful force wasn't the ability to destroy or consume, but the wisdom to find new ways to grow. And somewhere at the galaxy's edge, an entity that had known only consumption began to learn the same lesson, transforming not just space and time, but the very meaning of evolution itself.